So we are supposed to solve x to the fourth minus 3x squared equals 4. How many solutions am I looking for? 4, because that's the highest degree, right? So before I solve it, you should put it in standard form, graph it, and if it crosses all 4 times, you're good. Just write down those 4 solutions. If it doesn't cross 4 times, then you're going to have to factor to get the imaginary. Okay? So standard form would be what? X to the fourth minus 3x squared minus 4 equals 0. Just twice? Alright. More work? That's great news, because we all love math. We love factoring, so we get all excited when it only crosses twice. See how it kind of looks like a down there? I'm not really sure what you would call that down there, but that is a sure sign that it's imaginary when it starts looking like that. Okay, that it's imaginary. So we have our 2 real. It looks like -2 and 2, right? And then these 2 are imaginary. So I have 1 here, 2 here, which makes 4. So if all I wrote down is -2 and 2, you might get some credit, like 1/8 of a point or something, you know. But the most important part of this is finding those imaginary ones. Alright, so how can I factor this? Have we learned a way that if you have to the 4th power, to the 2nd power, constant, do we know of a way to factor that? So let's look over here, right? When I had to the 4th power, to the 2nd power, constant. Let's look what we did here. So we put the 2 here and the 3 here, right? And we found 2 numbers that multiplied to 2 and added to 3. That's 2 and 1. And normally my answer would be x plus 2, x plus 1. Because it's x to the 4th, it's going to be x squared plus 2, x squared plus 1. These are almost identical steps. Okay. Now, had that not been a 1 in front, then we have to split the middle term up. Okay. But it's a 1. Awesome. Okay. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to -4, but add to -3. -4 and 1. That does work. Good. Now remember, if this was not a 1, I'd have this up into minus 4x squared plus 1x squared and split it in half and factor that way, right? But, so I break x to the 4th into x squared and x squared, and then I copy down my minus 4 and my plus 1. All right. Well, if you distribute, you're going to get this back. So you could do that, yeah. Now, one thing I noticed is x squared minus 4. I could use the quadratic formula. A is 1, B would be 0, and C would be -4. And then I could go ahead and use the quadratic formula on this one too. A is 1, B is 0, and C is 1. Or, if you know how to factor, you could save yourself a lot of time. We talked about how to factor when you have 2 terms. X squared minus 4, how does that factor? So you have to break the 4 up. X plus 2, x minus 2. So, wait a minute, that's where my -2 came from. So this one produces x equals -2. And this one produces x equals 2. So those were my real solutions. Remember it crossed at -2 and 2? Yeah? So that was the easy part. I already knew those. Okay? But x squared plus 1, how does that factor? You could use a quadratic and get the solutions if you want. They are imaginary. How does that factor when it's a plus sign? Remember we talked about addition of squares? how they're different. X squared minus 36 makes x plus 6, x minus 6. X squared plus 36 is the same thing with an I. Is it what? Well, 1 times 1 is 1. So it would be 1, right? So it'd be x plus 1i and x minus 1i, right? Now when I set, just like here, see how it's opposite? It's negative 2. So the opposite of plus 1i is negative 1i. And the opposite of negative 1i is plus 1i. Okay? So we have 1i, a negative I, a 2, and a negative 2. So some people write their solutions like this. Solutions, you could write plus and minus 2, right? That means positive 2 and negative 2. And then you could also write down plus or minus I, or 1i, right? So those are my 4 solutions. Real fast, in case you don't believe me, if I confused you on x squared plus 1, you could use your quadratic. I'll spend like 20 seconds going over that. So a is 1, b is 0, c is 1, right? I'm just showing you that you could get the same answer if you didn't know how to factor. And so negative b would be 0. 0 squared is 0. 4 times 1 times 1 is 4. 0 minus 4 is negative 4. And then 2 times 1 is 2. Square root of negative 4 makes 2i. Which you don't need 0. So that equals plus or minus 2i over 2. The 2's cancel, making plus or minus I. So even if you don't know how to factor, you could use a quadratic formula, but factoring is so much simpler. 4 solutions are plus or minus 2 and plus or minus I.